Welcome to the another episode of Coffee with ESPU Research Committee YouTube series. Today I have Caleb Nelson from Boston, who is also a member of ESPU Research Committee and also a senior editor for the Journal of Pediatric Urology. Welcome, Caleb.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and we've had a great time in Istanbul so far. It's a beautiful city.
Yeah. Perfect. So I'll start with your role in Journal of Pediatric Urology. So you're one of the senior editors. So how do editors consider the submitted art manuscripts as valuable, or they are valid, or they are suitable for publication? And how should the researchers or the writers consider? What should they consider when they are writing the paper?
Yeah. There's a lot of things that the editorial board looks at when a submission is sent in, and it is a process, and often many people are involved in those decisions. The first things we look at are very simple, straightforward stuff, like, is this relevant to our audience? Is this really in the sphere that Journal of Pediatric Urology tries to cover? And we get quite a few submissions about things that are just not relevant to pediatric urology, or certainly not really of interest to people who do pediatric urology as a subspecialty. So some of those get weeded out just because they're not in our ballpark of what we're trying to cover. Then you have other things such as, is it readable? Is the language clear? Is it full of mistakes and errors and typos and things like that? Because if it's difficult for us to read, it's going to be difficult for our readers to read. And so we want to make sure that it meets a certain threshold of readability and legibility. And then beyond that, assuming that it's interesting to our audience and legible, then it becomes a question of, does the research that's being reported, does it meet the standards that we're going for? And I think JPU has been really diligent over the past few years about progressively increasing the standards of the research that we try to publish. And so you have to have a research question that's a valid research question that's looking at something of actual relevance and importance, and you have to have a study methodology that actually can address that. And it's actually pretty common that people will submit a paper, they'll do a project trying to look at a research question, and they'll use a methodology that can't answer that research question. They just don't have the strength. If you want to know if a medication is effective, and you ask that as your research question, then submitting a case series of 10 patients that all had that treatment doesn't answer your question. It might provide you some information, and sometimes even rudimentary research methodologies can be informative and useful. And so it's not like you would never publish a paper that's of that design, but it really matters what the question is and whether the research methodology can answer that. And so I think that's probably the single biggest barrier that authors run into, is they submit something that can't assess or address the question they're trying to get at. And so once you get past that bar, and you have a study design that can actually look at what you're interested in answering, then as long as the data are adequately presented and that the statistical analysis is appropriate and done the right way and appropriate for the type of data you're using, then I think you get very close to something that can be published with revisions and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, perfect. So that will be a very good hint for young researchers out there who are going to submit papers to any journal. So changing the point of view. So you had published many papers along with many rejections. So how do you cope with rejections, and how should young people who are at the early stages of their careers should cope with rejections, and how should they do to improve their sales?
Yeah, rejection is part of the business, right? So you just have to be prepared for that, and that's true of on the front end of doing research when you're trying to get funding. It's especially true when you're applying for grants and stuff like that. And I've had plenty of rejected grant applications in my life, and I think even the most successful researchers will tell you, if you ask them that question, they will tell you that they've had far more rejections than they've had successes. And I think a lot of it is just perseverance. You just keep at it. And now, obviously, if you keep doing the same thing over and over and you keep getting rejected, then that might be telling you something. Maybe what you're doing isn't necessarily going to lead to success. But if you learn from your rejections, if you take, you might send in a grant submission and it gets rejected, but they usually will provide you with some feedback and they'll tell you why they rejected it. And so that gives you a roadmap that maybe you can make some modifications or changes. You can alter your research plan and your proposal, and you submit it again. And then you get rejected again, and you get more feedback, and you make some more changes, and then you submit it again. And maybe you get rejected again. I mean, the people go through this iteration 3, 6, 8 times sometimes. I mean, they really do. And sometimes you never get it funded. You just never do, and that happens. And sometimes that's not fair, because sometimes people have great ideas, and either the establishment is not ready for it, or there's just too much opposition to a new concept. The paradigm is too fixed, and so you can't get it through, and that can be very frustrating, I think, for people. But I think more often than not that perseverance pays off if you keep at it, and so I think that's the number one message is keep at it. Just keep trying. Paper rejections are a little different because you've already done all the work, and now you got to figure out how to get it into publication. I think it's again, you usually, when you get a rejection from a journal, you will usually get a lot of feedback as to why they are rejecting it, and some of those flaws are not fixable. Your design is what it is. Your data that you collected are what they are. So you can either go back and get more data. If someone insists you can't report this research study without a control group, and you don't have a control group. So okay, well, depending on the scenario, maybe you can go get a control group, and then you can redo your analysis and compare it to the thing you're interested in. Other times it's more, things that are addressable, or things that you can modify, and you might have a better shot the next time around. And then there's always the old reliable of just try a different journal. So there's a lot of journals out there. I think nowadays, especially for younger, more junior people, you have to be very careful about where you're submitting stuff nowadays, because there's a lot of predatory journals out there, and by that I mean they're journals that are not really journals. They are entities that exist for the purpose of making money off of people who are really motivated to get research published. And so you really need to be careful about where you're submitting these things, and make sure that your work is going to an organization or a publication that is real and that exists for the purposes of actual dissemination of knowledge, and are not going to simply take your money and basically maybe or maybe not actually publish the work in a place that it can be seen, and in a place that it can contribute to the global knowledge. So I that's a caveat. You have to be careful where you're sending stuff, but there are plenty of legitimate journals out there, and if Journal A doesn't take it and Journal B doesn't take it, then try Journal C. And I think if you continue to try to make the work better, and you keep responding to the revisions and the reviewers, and address the flaws that they point out and correct the problems that they see, you can, if the study has merit, you can usually get it through. But it's a lot of work.
Yeah, perfect. So these are very nice insights on how to have a well-designed research and publish it. So yeah, methodology, as you say, is very important, and I think as reviewers we always take a strong strong eye on the methodology of the paper. Like as you said, like if it is previously mentioned, that is this question valid and the tools to answer this question is correct. So this is one of the most important things. So let's switch to another subject. And lastly, I would like to ask you, like, recently we are talking a lot of work-life balance, especially like talking about burnouts and everything. So what do you do to like separate your work from your life, and like how do you manage your stress in daily life? I know that you're running. Like, what else do you do to keep your mind busy with other than pediatric urology and research?
Yeah, it's hard, right? I mean, I don't think there's any simple answer to it. I think it's just a constant battle to try to keep the balance. And I think some of it is keep trying. I mean, some of that struggle is just continue to acknowledge that work isn't everything, unless for you work is everything. If you're a person for whom work is everything, great. Whatever makes you happy. But I think you have to constantly work to keep the balance where you want it, wherever that balance might be. You need to work, because our job, our career that we've all chosen, it can be all consuming if you let it be, whether it's clinical work alone or research work alone or the combination. There's never enough hours in the day. The emails never stop, right? The bureaucratic stuff, the forms you have to fill out, all the stuff we have to do that takes up each minute of the day, those never go away. And so you have to try to compartmentalize them, try to find, prioritize, what do I really need to do? What do I need to do later? And what do I'm just never going to do that. I'm just not going to do it. Whether that means saying no to someone for something that they want you to do and you just don't have the bandwidth. Prioritizing your effort, however you distribute that effort, is your decision to make, and don't let other people decide for you what your effort distribution is. Now, sometimes you don't have a say. If your chief comes to you and says, I need you to go to this hospital and see the patients there every Monday because that's what we need you to do. Well, okay, that maybe you don't have a choice. Maybe that's what you need to do. But I think continuing to see, well, where does that new task that I have, where does that fit into my work-life balance? Is there something else I need to give up because that's just going to, interfere with these other things that I need to do? That's a discussion that you have to have in your head constantly. And it's hard. It's really hard. I think for me, my kids are older now. So I'm not at sports events all weekend, every weekend. We're not traveling all over the region, going to various functions for my kids. And when my kids were younger, when I was younger, that was a struggle because I wanted to be there for those things. And yet every hour I spent watching a baseball game or a soccer game or football game was an hour I wasn't doing work, which was great. I liked that fact, but it means that work had to get done some other time. So it is a struggle, and I think everyone works their way through it. But I think be proactive and be assertive about what you want your work-life balance to be, and don't let the institutions or the people in charge, force you to do a career balance that you're not happy with, because what's the point if you're not happy doing it? It's
not long lasting.
Yeah, you only live once, so to the extent you can, find the balance that works for you.
Thank you very much, Caleb. So we are at the end of our YouTube video for today. So I would like to thank Caleb for his contributions to our chat.
It's great to be here. It's really fun to talk to you, and I've enjoyed the other sessions as well. So we look forward to seeing more of these.
Yeah, looking forward to have new episodes of Coffee with ESPU Research Committee series. Bye bye.